female entrepreneurs turned besties share on life, business, and the journey through the mess. Join their community with every new episode for connection, education, a few laughs, and the hype energy like a bathroom full of drunk girls at a bar. It's okay.
We're your friends now!
Welcome, it's Katie. I am here today with a very special guest. Ashley and Biz are out doing family and important life things. How dare they? Which gives me the opportunity to introduce you to another one of my friends, Sara Madrid. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm your friend now, too.
That's the best. Okay, so I'm going to have you give a full introduction of yourself in a minute. But I really want to point out, and I'm sure we'll tell the story about like how we met and how we're friends and stuff. But I want to point out that you sent me your bio and it starts out with dependable, a can-do attitude, charisma and joy that lights up a room. And those are words that Sara's coworkers and associates use to describe her. And as I was reading that bio, I was like, yes, this is like exactly what I would have written for her. Like if you would have put that in front of me, I would have been like, that's Sara, without a doubt.
That's so funny. I feel like I'm like the most extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
You know, I can fake it till I make it kind of a thing. It also just depends what kind of mood I'm in, but
for sure.
Especially when you're an entrepreneur and a mom, you know, because you
right.
see all those reels and stuff of like the awkwardness of like moms like meeting each other for the first time. And you just kind of have to put it out there. And then afterwards you're like, oh my God, what did I say?
Yeah.
But I just say it. I am verbal diarrhea of the mouth.
Well, I think there's something, and like, again, we'll get into this in a little bit, but I think that what you said is so true about like being a mom. You almost have to be extroverted in a way or else you get put on this island. And so it's like, even when you don't feel up to it or you're tired or whatever, you see other humans and you're like, oh my gosh, hi, it's an adult I can talk to. And it just kind of all comes out. So, but anyways, I just wanted to point out that like, I will put your bio like in the description of this, but I thought that was so perfect. It's so great. So anyways, give like a quick little intro of you because I could do it. You could do it better.
Yeah, no, me in a nutshell, the small pitch is, so I graduated college. I went to University of Rhode Island and I had graduated with a degree in communications, concentration in marketing. I also dabbled in women's studies a little bit, but I was in a sorority. So there was like a little bit of a dichotomy there. And actually by my senior year, my mom gave me the check for the sorority dues. And I was like, I don't want to associate. I was like, I'm not wasting your money on this. I did not even give the check. I mean, sororities do some great stuff, philanthropic stuff, like particularly where I went to school. It was basically like, how many opportunities can we take to make mundane things into like drinking opportunities? And that,
cool.
I just, listen, that goes into a whole other tangent that I can go on about like higher education and like my husband and my plans for our kids in the future. But so anyway, so my concentration was in marketing, but my career sort of veered off track and I went sort of more of like the business development avenue. I sold gym memberships for a little while. And I also taught group exercise. I taught Zumba and Pilates. And then I was a pharmaceutical rep for a little while, which is a very fascinating and interesting industry that we could probably do a whole hour on. But basically after 2 years, I was like, this is insane and not for me. And then I landed in business development working for a large ticket broker for a decade. And I oversaw partnerships for family shows and touring shows, worked on Harlem Globetrotters and professional bull riders and Nitro Circus, and basically secured those partnerships from the ground up. Like, PBR and Nitro Circus was like literally me picking up the phone and trying to get somebody on the phone as high up as I possibly could. And I was successful because of my charismatic can-do attitude. And that's what I did. And, it's interesting because, a big thing about me, and you see it in my bio, is like trust and honesty and integrity. And especially now. So now I work with my husband. He started a digital marketing agency 8 weeks after our third child was born, which is how you and I met. Everything links back together. And so, that's what our agency is really founded on, is basically with our clients, giving them transparency, letting them be a partner and really drive the bus on their marketing campaigns. So that's what we're about. But, working for a ticket broker in the secondary market is kind of not any of those things.
Right.
Not to speak poorly of my previous employer, but I definitely think, like, when you look inside yourself and, your values, it definitely wasn't aligned with who I am as a person. So that's my professional story. My personal story is I have been married to my husband, Rob, for 8 years. I lose count. 8 years. No, 9 years. 9 years. What is this? 2024? We've been married 9 years.
More than 5, less than 10. It's fine.
Oh my God. My brain. And we have 3 kids. Callie is 7, Lola is 5, Gavin is 3. So we had 3 kids in 3.5 years. They're each under 2 years apart. So yeah, doing all the things, running a business, running a household. As I just told you, also doing a major house renovation. I am recovering from surgery. We go in this family. So
basically what I'm hearing you say is, like, you're constantly bored and you have nothing going on.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you said a lot that I want to dive into. I'm going to give backstory here. So Sarah and I met back when I was pregnant with Connor. There's a podcast that we enjoyed listening to, and that podcast has like several Facebook groups that are kind of offshoots of like people who listen go to these groups. This whole thing sounds crazy. Like it doesn't seem like me to join. I was thinking about this the other day. I am not one to like go join a fan club for a podcast and then join like subculture fan. The whole thing, I was like, I don't even know what led me to that point, but here we are. It's fine. Anyways, one of the groups was like, somebody said, is there a group for people who are pregnant and expecting in 2021? So I joined that because it was my first kid. I didn't know what to expect out of pregnancy. I mean, most people listening know like my story and how crazy that time in my life was. And then we just started doing like everybody was talking about when they were due. And so I started a group chat for people who were due in February if they wanted to like join in, because we were all going through like the same things at the same time. And so that was like back in 2020, I guess. At some point we started like September of 2020 or something. Started it. And
4 years ago.
And I truly kind of thought that it would just be like some girls that once in a while, if I was freaking out about something, I could ask them if it was normal or something like that. And it so quickly turned into like all day, every day, constantly talking. We found so much solidarity and help and like true friendship. Like I've traveled the country to see some of these people. Sarah and I are now working on something together. And I found like this just really incredible group of women. And so I found Sarah there, and I always admire, because like you do something, we talk about this a lot on the podcast for the 3 of us, is like we enjoy working, right? So like being an entrepreneur is really kind of natural for us because we enjoy working, and so we love to do something where we know we can put in as much as we want, we're going to get a good output from it. But like working a ton, having kid or 3 kids in your case, and then like you were always prioritizing your health and working out and like taking care of you. And that was the part for me that always fell off of like, I have no time left for myself. And you just always were such a shining light of like, your family is beautiful, you are beautiful, and you're like, I'm going to do all of these things and also be an example for my children that like I'm important. And
but Katie, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but isn't it so funny, like to hear you say that? It's so funny that like that's how it looks, right? And that's like
right?
when we talk about social media and the impact of things like that. Like,
yeah,
if you saw my house, the train station that this place is at 7:30 in the morning, I mean, it's anything but that. And it's so funny because like, yeah, to be fully transparent, like, we were pregnant during a pandemic, really hard, isolating time.
Yeah.
And I gained a lot of weight with my son, Gavin.
Yeah.
Like, more than I should have, got way off of my, normal routine. And one day when I was 2 months postpartum, my sister-in-law, we had just done like a little Easter egg hunt for, all the cousins. And my sister-in-law sent me a picture, it was me with him strapped to me, outside with the cousins. And she's thinking, oh, isn't this a nice photo of like you with the baby? And I looked at this photo and I cried. And I said to my husband, this is not me. This is not me. This is not what I look like. Yeah. And that was it. That was my light bulb moment. Everyone has one for one thing or another, whether it's fitness or, a hobby that you want to pursue, whatever it is. And I was like, okay, got to get on it. So it just became something that was really important to me, not because of aesthetics, but just because of how I wanted to feel. I wanted to feel like myself. And so I just started to kind of rearrange my schedule. And like, for me, getting up early, getting my exercise in, monitoring what I ate, not in an obsessive way at all, because I was breastfeeding. And it just became very quickly, it was like diet, like, no, dirty word. We're not doing that. We're just being cognizant of like portions and what we're putting in our body. And like, I will tell you, I eat pizza all the time. I eat ice cream all the time. I have a good time with my kids, but my kids also know when they want to find me at 6 o'clock in the morning, they come down and they find me on my Peloton bike. But it's interesting that like, it looks like that. Like it looks so easy. It is anything but easy. And everybody goes through their season of life. That is what works for me right now. There are so many moms that are going through it that just cannot fathom like, an exercise routine. Like I can't. And you know what? The important thing is to say, that's okay. As long as your doctor is not concerned about your health, that's okay. If this is not your time will come. Yeah. So
and there's probably no, I love that. And there's probably other ways to like still keep that mentality of finding something that you can improve upon, right? Because like, I mean, this, like Connor, God bless, love the little boy who never sleeps. And so, I went through a phase where I was sleeping like 2 hours a night, and there's no way that I was then I do what I could, I'd go on walks or whatever, but like it wasn't happening. And so I was like, okay, what can I work on? I can work on like my mindset around things, or like work on a project or something with work. And I think that talking about phases of life and how you're able to prioritize yourself and your family, one of the standout things, and I'm probably going to cry because that's who I am. I got to watch you prioritize your family in a really interesting way. And you can say as little as or as much about this as you want.
No, let's go into it. Yeah.
So we watched your husband get very sick very suddenly. And how long had you been with y'all's, like you had just joined on to the business?
Yeah, we were having this conversation yesterday because we've grown a lot since then. It was like a year and a half ago. And, he said to me yesterday, if this happened now, I don't know what we would do. But I had been in the business. I had joined the business in September and he got sick in March. So we're talking like 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. So walk us through like a little bit. I mean, I know I saw it, but walk us through a little bit of like what happened and what that shifted.
Yeah, you had a front row seat. Yeah, you and the rest of the Hedgies. We should say we call ourselves the Hedgies because we all somehow bought the same hedgehog print sleeper for our babies, and that just became us. We're the Hedgies. So we always send each other hedgehog stuff whenever we see it. But yeah, you had a front row seat to that story. So I'd been working with him for like 6 months, and my oldest daughter was in kindergarten, had a sore throat, didn't really think much of it, looked in the throat, didn't see the telltale signs, whatever. My other kids got sick a couple weeks later, but they were so little, didn't think anything of it. Then he got sick, and he was like really sick, which is not like him, bedridden, didn't work for probably 3-4 days straight. Wow. And he thought he had a really bad sinus infection. Anyway, long story short, it ended up going to his leg and became necrotic. So he got necrotizing fasciitis in his leg. And drove himself to we live in a very rural area of Connecticut, drove himself to the hospital that, in short, you don't want to drive yourself pee at if you're in a life or death situation. I mean, so it took them a little longer than it probably should have to realize that they were above their pay grade and needed to transfer him somewhere else. So he was hospitalized. He called me at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning to tell me he was going into surgery and he might lose his leg.
Yeah.
He does not remember this conversation, by the way, which I think is like one of those survival of the fittest things.
Oh,
So I drove to the hospital, which was 45 minutes away, sat there while he was in surgery. Thank God his sister came and sat with me and, didn't really know what was going to happen. So he was in the ICU, intubated for a week. Thank God they were able to save his leg, but he did have to go in for 3 surgeries for debridement. So his leg is now disfigured, but it is there. And we were very thankful. But yeah, so seeing your loved one, your husband intubated is heartbreaking and very, very difficult, especially because they decided to have him awake. Don't ask me why. And if this were to ever, God forbid, happen again, I think we've agreed that neither one of us would let this happen because he was awake, intubated, miserable, unable to communicate, uncomfortable.
yeah.
I don't know why, probably because he was young and fairly healthy. So they probably wanted to see how they could bring him out of it, but it was just absolute torture. And it is one of the only things he does remember now. So yeah, just awful, very isolating. And I'll tell you, the hospital, they don't do a lot for families, for, a mother of 3 very, very little kids. I mean, I had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old at the time. So, yeah, I was like very much on my own. I was extremely fortunate, just by the grace of God. His parents happened to already be on their way up here to visit the day that he went into the hospital. They live in South Carolina.
Wow.
So they came, they moved in for 6 weeks. My mom moved in for 6 weeks. Everybody helped. But yeah, in terms of our business, I was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to learn how to do things that I never knew how to do. And I would bring my laptop to the hospital every day and he would just dictate to me like certain things, that I needed to do. Then I brought him his laptop because when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, when you're running a business, it's sink or swim.
Right.
We were very lucky to have, very, sympathetic clients who really, gave us a lot of love and care. But at the end of the day, like their business does still need the services, the marketing services that they are, hiring you for.
Sure.
So we were able to come through it. But and then he got out of the hospital and it was still a really, really long road to recovery.
So walk me through a little bit about because when you hear that story, the first thing you think is right, like fear, stress, sadness, anger, it's all of the negative emotions. How did you channel that into, I mean, you were freaking superwoman, because I remember every day I'm like, do you want me to drive up and I don't know, I can make you dinner, I don't know what to do. And you were like, I've got this happening and this happening and this happening and I've got it. And I was like, has she just sat and cried yet? Because I feel like I would still be doing that. And yet somehow you channeled, walk me through that, because you channeled all of it into production and not just in your business, but your kids were happy, probably stressed also, but you kept the business running and you were able to be there and be a supportive wife.
Well, Katie, first of all, it has to be said that you are an incredible friend, because not just with me, but there have been other situations that have happened amongst this group that you have been the first person to step up and be like, I'll be there, I'll drive there, I'll drop everything. And you mean it. You're not one of those people that just says it to be nice. You absolutely mean it. And I was afraid that you were gonna put yourself out. But I mean, and it's rare. I mean, and that's why it's so great to find a friendship with you, because you don't always find people again with that integrity.
Yeah.
But for myself, I have always been, I think, just in my nature of okay, let's just get through this and we can unpack it later.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I very much did that. By the time he got out of the hospital, I had gotten myself therapy and I'm still in therapy and I still work through it. I mean, to be fully transparent, I came out of this because this was already after COVID, right? COVID was just
right.
When he went into the hospital, masks were still mandatory. They only became optional, I think, when we were going for his follow-up appointments. So it was on the heels of COVID, I ended up with and still deal with severe anxiety around sickness. I mean, I'll be honest, like I found out that strep is going around at my kid's school, and my kindergartner for some reason didn't have her water bottle this morning. And I was so afraid that she was going to like drink out of the water fountain. I came home, got her water bottle, and drove it back to school this morning because I just like, I came out. I mean, it's just like, I mean, every time I think that there might be strep, like my kids, like my 7-year-old is traumatized because she's had more throat swabs than she cares to have. And she's not great at that stuff. But, you know, that was sort of the fallout for me. And, you know, everybody in my family knows I have a really, really severe anxiety, like about like hand washing and germs. And like, you know, it really just recently did I allow us to like, you know, if we had something big coming up, not necessarily like be shut-ins, you know, like if we had a trip coming up, I was like, we're not going anywhere for a week because I don't want to mess anything up. And then I realized like you can't live life that way. Sure. So I think I went through the motions and I went through what I had to at the time, but I definitely have been, you know, impacted and working through what all of that means ever since.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Do you think that like, did you allow yourself that time to really, I know you're in therapy, which is probably the perfect place to do this, but like you push through, you compartmentalize. And I feel like oftentimes, especially as moms, working moms, anybody, we say that and then we don't actually take the time to do it. Like we don't let ourselves kind of unpack and like decompress from what just happened and truly process it, because you like, I mean, in the moment, it was horrifying, right? But you had no other option. I feel like there was just no other option other than to like get everything done and take care of it. But then afterwards, you know, like Rob comes back, there's recovery time, and then you help work through that. And then life doesn't stop. Like there's all sorts of other stuff going on.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, I think one day I was like, okay, I'm going to go get a pedicure. You know, and like left the kids here with like my in-laws and my mom, which was great. And that was a good like moment, but it's an hour of a pedicure. And then you come back to like the hell that is going on around your life. You know, and it's funny because we agreed, you know, when he got out of the hospital, we had a lot of conversations about like, okay, we're prioritizing health, like health is most important. So that's another reason why like fitness and, you know, quality nutrition is very important to me. And it's a conversation that, to be fully transparent with you, that Rob and I have had, my husband, Rob, and I have had a lot recently, because we have grown, our business has grown. We are extremely blessed to be very successful and to be growing. But he's kind of back to a cadence that he was prior to going into the hospital of working late nights and, you know, pushing himself, I think, you know, in ways that sometimes I'm like, remember, we were prioritizing health. So it's a conversation that we're constantly having, because how quickly we forget, right?
Right.
You do push through and you go on and you're like, oh, right, that big thing that happened, that could happen again.
Yeah. Well, and especially when it's something like that you never think will happen, and then it does. And then I guess it probably would be easy to fall back into that routine of like, well, that was a one-off. Like that would never happen again.
Yeah. And thank goodness I didn't know then what I know now, because I've probably like looked up way too much about sepsis ever since, that like he's extremely lucky, not only to have his leg, but to have his life. You know, this story generally does not end well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So we're really, really, really fortunate. And unfortunately, he does live with, as I said, a disfigurement on his leg. But I constantly remind him, you have a leg, and a
disfigured leg is better than no leg.
Exactly. I mean, and as he was sitting in that initial surgery when I didn't know, I'm literally thinking, okay, we have a 2-floor house, our bedroom's upstairs, we're going to have to move. Like, you know, I'm going through all these motions in my head, because it's like, wow, in a flash, our whole life might be drastically changing.
Yeah. That it's so wild. So wild. Okay. So number one, thank you for sharing that, because I just like every time your resilience and your strength is such a like, again, having a front seat to that whole thing, I was like, I just don't know how she's functioning. This is so incredible. But then you like, and I know everything is more beautiful when we present like the highlights, right? But truly, y'all came back from that. You decided to be intentional about your health. You two work as a team, which like that also is an adjustment, working with your spouse, right? Like that is an adjustment. But then you managed to like also keep your family thriving, and you are growing, like your business is growing and you're doing really well. So talk me through like what's your mindset? I mean, I know some of it, but like your mindset around like growth and how intentional you are with your family and your goals.
Yeah. So, like, to back it way up. So, we met pregnant with your first, my third baby back in 2020. When I had my oldest daughter, that was in 2017. And so I worked, like I said, I worked for like a typical, corporate environment. I had an employer, and I was in management. For some reason, I don't know why, but actually I do know why. So I used to listen to this radio show in the morning on Sirius Radio, that was really great. But when I would get in the car in the afternoon, it was always Dr. Laura. And I just I don't know why, but I would listen to it because I loved hearing people call in with their problems.
Yes.
She is very notoriously, very anti-daycare, vilifies working moms. She goes in hard. Now, I don't mean to make a stance on that or whatever, but as someone who was pregnant with her first baby at the time, making a giant change in my life, that was really impactful to hear that all the time. Probably in retrospect should have just changed the station, but coulda. So when we first started talking about, what was life going to look like as a working mom, because I that was the plan.
Yeah.
I was like, we're not putting our baby in daycare. Dr. Laura says your baby is not loved in daycare, and all of this.
Dr. Laura's my doctor now.
And I just, I was really hesitant about going back to work. I had a lot of really conflicted feelings. And as a matter of fact, when I had her, there were two other women who were pregnant at the same time. So we all went out around the same time having our babies. I was the only one out of the three to come back. The two other moms decided to work inside the home, shall we say, because as we know, being a mom is work. It's all work. It's just where you distribute it. But that made me feel obviously really crappy. It almost made me feel like I didn't care about my baby, even though I knew I did. We ended up finding this daycare that is literally down the street from our house. We could not be luckier. I was so scared about daycare and all of the horror stories that I had heard. And I mean, it is a no-frills daycare. It is not a chain. There are no apps, but my kids are so loved. So we're 7 years there. We've had 2 kids graduate. In 2 years, I don't want to think about it when Gavin graduates. I am going to be heartbroken because they're so loved. They're so well taken care of. Lola, my kindergartner, she just graduated, and immediately her teacher was messaging me how is she doing in kindergarten? Please give her my love.
Aww.
So I think that's a really important message. If there's any working moms, which I'm sure, I know you have a large base of working moms that listen to your podcast, it can be done, right? There are so many different ways that it can be done, and it doesn't have to be bad. And I don't think that I'm meant to be full-time at home. I think that I have other virtues that my talents are best used for. And, that's definitely part of it. But I had a really conflicting feeling about going back to work. And by the time I had my third baby, I actually went back to work 8 weeks postpartum, which, very, very part-time, from home, very part-time, 2 days a week. I would literally nurse him, put him down, and spend 3 hours working. Partially because I after 3 babies in 3.5 years, I just kind of wanted to keep my brain going and whatever. But also, to be perfectly honest, I worked in live entertainment in a very, very male-dominated environment. And there were a lot of deals that I had done the legwork on. And quite frankly, I didn't want anybody else getting the credit. I wanted to see it through. So I did that, and I mean, the transition, there were a lot of things that I could go into for reasons of why I decided to leave. But I mean, I just basically saw, to put it in a nutshell, that I was a workhorse, right? Before I had kids, I was in early in the morning. I like to get in and start working before anybody else got there. A lot of times at the end of the day, I'd look around and I was the only one still there. Because what else did I have? I had my husband at home, but he could take care of himself.
Right.
And so when I became a mom, my work ethic and my production did not change. In fact, I think I produced more because we know as moms, we know that we have to get shit done. I hope I can swear.
Oh, yes. We swear a lot.
But you just do it, right?
Yeah.
But I think because I had a lot of, male energy
Yeah.
around me, that I was looked at as just a mom, and like, she's not going to
Mhm.
really go that much further because like her kids are her priority. But I mean, come on, my kids should be my priority. My family should be
Right.
my priority. I could leave tomorrow and you'll go on. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, this company
Right.
still thrives, still does well, but who's going to replace me in my home?
Right.
So, at that time, my husband, Rob, like, he had started this agency, like I said, 8 weeks after our baby was born, he left his job to start this full time. He was getting to a point where he was really in over his head and needed some help. And it was just the perfect storm of like, it's time for me to walk away from corporate life and
Yeah.
into entrepreneurial life.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah. you know, there's a learning curve for sure.
Yeah.
But what I have found, and I think this is where you and I are kindred spirits a little bit, is I don't think that I could go back to like the corporate employer life. Now, for some people, it's great, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody has different priorities and everybody has a different way of working. And some people really like knowing, okay, I have a company that I work for. My benefits are taken care of. This is my salary. I punch in, I punch out. I do my
100%.
thing, I collect my paycheck, and I live my life.
Yep.
I really love this life because leadership, as we have talked about a lot, is a huge, huge thing for me. And just being able to control your own destiny. And, that we have the ability to say, yep, this is a client we want to take on. This client, after having this discovery meeting, maybe this is not a fit. And we're very honest. We will tell potential clients, we don't think we're the fit for you. We don't think that this is going to work. Or even if we're working with them, we might say, this is really, we're not the best for you. There are probably other directions you can go in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and think about too, like the example that you're setting for your kids. If you live your life that way, because you said a word earlier that's one of my favorites, and that was alignment. And you are showing them in every facet of your life what alignment can do. And like you're rewarded for that, right? Because your business is growing, y'all are thriving, you're doing well, but you're also happy. Not every single moment is the best when you're an entrepreneur, but overall, right? Like you get to do the things you want to do. You get to work with the people that you choose to work with, which is such a huge thing. And when you've taken a look at it, especially like y'all, where you have your priorities thrown in your face and you see so clearly what they are, it's like, is this person worth me taking time from my family or not? And am I in alignment? And then your kids get to see that example and take that into account as they get older and choose who they're going to allow in their life. And I just think that that's so cool that y'all live that right in front of them.
Yeah. And being like a husband and wife team. And I've seen this a lot in the conversations that we've had about like the way that you and Brett work things, which is like, we're able to divide and conquer on business versus parenting stuff. Because again, there is that alignment, right? Like we're literally in every facet on the same team. Previously, because I had a job and certain obligations, I had to travel sometimes. There were a lot of times where it was like, okay, well, whose thing is more important right now?
Right.
And how do we balance that versus like, okay, I'll take, like there are times where he's like, I'll take the kids to school. Can you go in and take a look at this campaign and make these adjustments? And like, it just works. And and again, I've seen that, you've shared a lot of that with you and Brett as well. Yeah. Which is really cool. It's not every husband and wife that can do that. So I guess we have to consider ourselves very fortunate.
Very. Well, you should know this too. So Ashley, one of our other hosts, her husband's name is Shane, and we have like the Shane fan club because he also is just like green flags all over the place. They don't work in the same industry, but it's the same thing we talk about. Like when your big goal is the same and united, everything else is just a game plan of how to hit that, right? So like when they don't work in the same industry, they don't have the same work goals, but their life goals are the same. And so then it's not whose thing is more important. It's how do we strategically get to this goal and what part do each of us play? And that's a totally different conversation than having to fight for validity with your partner and feel like you're contributing to what's going on, So
for
I think
sure.
that's really cool.
And to be clear, a big part of it was my job was very stressful.
Yeah.
Very stressful. Just the way that expectations were handed down, the way that expectations for how I would manage my own team. And again, when we come back to leadership, things that I just ultimately, and a big piece of it was I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable managing or, communicating with my team in that way. I really wanted to be coaching them, encouraging them, having a conversation like, what are you good at? What do you like to do? What do you excel at? And I just wasn't given that opportunity. And there was a lot of stress around that. And Rob had experienced that in his previous job as well. And I think both of us, we had a lot of conversations at that time of how when you bring that stress, when you have that all day long at work, it comes home with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to eliminate it for a harmonious life. And that's the thing, like, especially when you go through like the medical stuff we've gone through,
Right.
We didn't talk about this, but, I had a pulmonary embolism after I had Gavin, we've been through a lot in this house. So, we got to reduce the stress and make things work.
Yeah, man, that's so good. That's so good. Okay, we're coming up on finishing, which makes me really sad because I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for another 5 hours. Tell me, and I probably should have prepped you with this, but we throw questions at each other all the time on this podcast. So tell me, if you could go back in time to your like 18-year-old self and you get one line of advice, not one piece of advice, one sentence of advice, what would you say?
It doesn't have to go the way that the world makes you think it has to go.
Yes.
I mean, so much. If I could just briefly elaborate, like,
please do.
I know I touched on this at the beginning about talking about higher education. I went to a private school, college preparatory school, for a lot of reasons, but I, was very like much so of like, go to college. At 18 years old, I did not know what I wanted to do. I did not know where I wanted to go to school. As a matter of fact, the school I went to my freshman year of college, I transferred out of because it was everything wrong for me. And I spent a long time just not really sure what I wanted to do. And I think in general, getting experience, we talk about that a lot. My oldest daughter, Callie, she's very, very good visually, graphically. She also has a lot of like medical interests. So that would necessitate higher education. But if she were to go the route of like being interested in like art and graphic design, I mean, what more perfect opportunity than to work for her parents, in our marketing business and get experience that way. So it doesn't always have to be like one straight line. Look at what you're good at, try to get experience, go out into the world, make connections, network, be friendly. It's going to take you way further than, whatever like culture and society tells you that you're supposed to be doing.
Amen to that. We could do a whole nother episode on our children's life paths. Okay, before we hit end, I need you to plug the business and if anybody needs a reference, please let me know because I will happily give it. But give us the deets.
Yeah. So our company is called DigiArcs. We do digital marketing, search engine optimization, and websites, which we are currently working together on one. Digiarcs.com, digidesigncompany.com for our website work. And hit us up.
Hit them up. All right. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you so much. You're our friend now too. And we will see everybody else back here next week when the gang's all back. Okay, bye.